Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So we're really excited to have Max, former founder of OkCupid, with us and current founder of Keybase. Thank you so much for coming. We do this every month. We're really excited to have you here. Just a few quick things about Startup Grind. First of all, we actually just had an annual conference out in San Francisco. It was pretty exciting. And I see a number of faces in the audience who are actually here, so thanks for coming. Before we get started real quick, we'll do some quick housekeeping stuff. There's a men's bathroom here in the front. If you're going to use it, try not to use it during the actual interview, but if you need to, please kind of come around the back. There's a women's bathroom in the back corner there. I have to thank all of our volunteers who helped organize this event real quick because they're awesome and they're here at every event, and can't say thank you enough for their help. One of the big things that they did for you is actually write the Wi-Fi and password on the whiteboard over there. So go ahead and get on the internet. The Wi-Fi is pivotal guest and the password is make it happen, all lowercase, one word. The reason you want to do that is because we are actually going to have you guys tweet your questions, you guys and gals, tweet your questions to us while we are on stage. And we're actually going to be pulling those questions from Twitter in real time during the interview. So please go ahead and tweet your questions. You'll see them show up here, and then I will also be pulling them during the interview. So, are you guys excited to hear from Max tonight?
Yes.
Yeah. No? Not excited? No? All right, are you excited to hear from Max tonight? How many people here are OkCupid users? Raise your hands. Former users, you don't have to say you're using it right now, but have used OkCupid at some point. All right, maybe 50%. Great. One more thing before we get started, we really have to thank Pivotal Labs. They've been a consistent, amazing sponsor for us. They provided the food, they provided the drink for tonight, and obviously provided their office. So in case you don't know what Pivotal does, I'm going to welcome Rob real quick to the stage, and he's going to tell you what they do and how they can help you out.
Yeah, just a quick announcement about Pivotal. We're a software consulting company that specializes in agile development. When it comes to our client list, we're dedicated to keeping a balance between Fortune 1000 companies and startups. We are hiring, so if anybody's interested in joining our team, we're looking for designers, engineers, and product managers. So you could talk to me after the event about that. Or if you're just interested in seeing what Pivotal could do for your company, you could talk to me about that as well afterwards. And that's it. I'm going to hand it back. Enjoy the meetup, everybody.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rob. All right, so without further ado, please make a little more noise than you did last time for Max Krohn, former founder of OkCupid and current founder of Keybase. Max, thanks for coming. Thanks so much for coming. You got your mic on there?
Sure thing. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Peter, I learned a long time ago not to ask people if they use OkCupid because sometimes people are like, yeah, I use it, but other times people are like, I don't know what to say. So
yeah,
thanks for doing that for me.
Yeah, of course. It's really interesting, though. I mean, obviously, OkCupid was one of the first online dating companies that hit it really big, and now it's become a much bigger thing. Did you have competitors when you first launched OkCupid?
Yeah, it was a different time back then. So we first got the idea in the 2003, 2004 era of the internet, and back then there were very few competitors. I think Match.com certainly existed, and they're actually quite an amazing company because they've been around since 1995, which is saying a lot in the internet space. I mean, so many companies, overexpanded and collapsed in the first .com bubble, but Match.com has been like one of these very consistent performers, and they just, they even in this day and age when people use Tinder and OkCupid, they're still extremely relevant. So yeah, Match.com was around, but we had this thought that people were getting more accustomed to getting things for free. Like if you had Google for free and Yahoo Mail for free back then. Why should you pay $40 a month for internet? And that was one of the ideas, that maybe people should have a free option as opposed to Match.com. And the other thing is that, especially when they first got started, there was a stigma attached to internet dating, and that's certainly eroded over time, and to the point where nowadays, I mean, depending if you ask like, people in college, I mean, there's probably zero stigma, whatsoever. But we were overcoming that hurdle as well, and I think we were predicting a world in which it would go away because, as everything else, if you were buying your pet food online, maybe you'd also consider using an OkCupid or a dating website online as well. So I think there were those dynamics happening as well. In 2003, though, I think Match was like really the biggest player, and everything else was just an also ran, I think. So there was, but I will say Match is extremely effective at marketing, and so it would be almost impossible to start something in their business and to try to match the $30 or $40 a month subscription model and come along and outmarket them, to give a better ad on the radio. And I think like some people have tried to do it over the years, but they've always been shut down. I think they've always been out-marketed by Match.com, who has so much brand recognition. And so we knew they'd be an extreme challenger to try to overcome. I mean, we were the challenger, but like an extreme incumbent to try to overcome just because they had such a demanding, commanding control over the dating scene back then.
Yeah, and it certainly seems like over the last 5 years, creating a dating app has become pretty common. I think once or twice a week you can run into someone in New York that says they're creating a dating app. Did you pay much attention to Tinder and the rise of Tinder, because they kind of came out of nowhere?
That's a great question. So dating is an extremely hard business to break into and an extremely hard business to be unseated once you're in, and it's because it has such a strong network effect. The first 100,000 people who used OkCupid said, this site sucks. There's like one user in my town. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I mean, the number of people you need in the same city who all have roughly similar interests, who are all roughly the same ages, and to get a variety of people, it's like an extreme barrier to overcome. So that's why when a lot of times when we heard about XYZ dating site being launched, where we had actually made some progress ourselves, we weren't really worried. And the flip side is that once you've actually built a good dating website, like, eventually like OkCupid became, but certainly not at first, there's a good barrier to entry where you don't always have to be looking over your shoulder to see if someone's going to run you down. In terms of the apps, I think, I speaking for the creative team at OkCupid, which I'm kind of more on the technical side of the business, but certainly I've spent a lot of time with those guys. But I think when Grindr launched, they're like, why didn't we think of this? So Grindr was like the real huge innovation, I think, in terms of mobile. I mean, that app has been huge for 4 or 5 years now. Right. And Tinder was like a little bit of a play on Grindr. I mean, they certainly got some things right, such as the UI. It was a pretty good innovation, and that matters for a lot. I mean, obviously, in any consumer-facing product, like the UI is so important. But that was, that was the philosophical kind of contribution of Tinder, and a lot of people have tried to do Tinder, like a lot of people have tried to do Grindr for straight people, in the 5 years after Grindr launched, and everyone failed. And so Tinder is pretty remarkable, but at the same time, it's there are so many players, like one of them was going to find the right tweaking of the variable. So there was a little bit of that. When we were getting towards the 2009-10 era at OkCupid, when we noticed that internally a lot of our traffic was going mobile, we looked at our internal metrics, and just web sessions were going mobile, and the desktop was staying flat, and the mobile was just exploding. We knew that was actually a pretty vulnerable time for us, because whenever the medium shifts, I think it's a time when incumbents or people who have a good position in the market can be unseated. And so we were worried that with mobile somebody was going to figure it out, and that would be pretty bad for OkCupid. I mean, as it turned out, we were half right and half wrong, because someone did figure it out. But it turns out that I think OkCupid and Tinder are pretty complementary products, so it's not as if one's destroying the other right now.
Right. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about the origins of OkCupid.
Okay.
You actually started it with a team of 3 other co-founders, and it was it's not the first project that you worked on together, if I'm right. So why did Max Krohn help start a dating app? Where did that come from?
Well, that's That's a good question. I've been doing this kind of startup type stuff for about, I guess 16 years now. And I'm an extremely risk-averse person. So I think it's just kind of, I wound up in this life that I probably would never have sought out myself. So
right.
I guess it all goes back. Our team got its start in college. And so it's one of these things where the first day of college, I met Sam and Chris, and who are the two of the guys.
Literally the first day?
Literally the first day of college. Sam was my roommate, and Chris was the guy who lived across the hall. So
Wow.
That's when I met them. That was 1995, to date myself even further. And we were friends throughout college. At the end of school, in like the 99 era, Chris, who's a guy, I feel like this is a little bit too close.
Yeah, you can bend it back a little bit.
Sorry, is that better? I hear like a storm of wind. Okay. So in spring of 99, Chris is the guy who kind of has all these crazy brainstorms. And he had an idea for more or less an insult generator. I think that's how we all got our start. He wrote this program that would run on your Windows machine, and you would push like generate insult, and it would just come up with a very offensive insult like every time. And everyone was different, and you could just play with that thing for a while and be very offended. And so So he had this thing, and he's like, how do I get anyone to know about it? Because and this is like, I guess, so much like the story of building a website. It's like the thing you want to build is almost not the point. It's like, how do you get someone to know about the thing you want to build? And so he said, how do I get someone to know about my insult generator? And so he came up with this kind of viral spam marketing system to get the word out for his insult generator, and it turned out like the viral marketing spam system was a better product than the insult generator. So that was Chris, and I think in the spring of '99 he brought me and Sam onto the team, and so Sam was going to be the business side of the team, and I was going to be more of the technical side and try to make this thing so it could scale up to more users. And I guess my background was I was a computer science major at school, so I had a fair amount of experience. I think. Well, actually, that's another thing. Back then, it was pretty hard to even know what you were supposed to do to build a website, and I think we take it for granted now. Where for those of us who are developers, if we ever have a problem, we just Google it, and like Stack Exchange will tell us the answer. But in '99, that did not exist. You would not have the first idea how to build anything. And so just doing the most basic things back then was somewhat of a challenge, because just to figure out all this stupid stuff that nobody thought to even write a web page on. So anyway, that's kind of how we got our start. And so in another weird pivot, we had this, so we made this viral marketing scheme, which was kind of like a dating. It was a very no-frills dating application. It was like, you would list like the 6 people you had a crush on, and they'd all get emails. Like they get, someone has a crush on you as an email, and then you'd then be asked to then, those 6 people would then be asked to say, who do you have a crush on? And they'd enter the email address. So like, whatever you are, 95 at like brown.edu, you'd have to enter. And
so was this something that you were trying to package and sell to other businesses?
No, we were just spamming the internet, I think. That was the goal. And this thing did grow exponentially. It's just like we started with 10 people, and within a month we had like 2 million people, which was it was a pretty big list back then.
Yeah.
And it grew really quickly. And
that's some percentage of total internet users.
I know, exactly. And it's the kind of thing, too, where it's like you could never in a million years do that today, because like no one would click on it, and it would be like stuck in spam filters. And it was like, it only existed for a very short amount of time. So we had these people coming to the website, and we're like, maybe this like insult generator isn't the right thing to give them. What they really want instead are, maybe we said, online versions of Cliff Notes. I don't know why we said that, but that's like the first thing we thought of, and that's what we did. So we started building. I don't know. Did people heard of Cliff Notes? It's like the study guides that prevent you from reading books. Okay. Anyway, so we're like, this should be free. I mean, you shouldn't have to spend $5 on this. So we were able to hire our friends to just like write these things, and they were pretty quick to churn out. And so we made about 20 of them in a couple, maybe about like a month or so of work. And my friend Justin is in the audience here. He was one of the people who was involved with that early effort. So I don't know where he is, but so then we're like, yeah, this is something people want, they'll use forever, like Spark Notes. Like, this is the way of the future. And so, again, we were thinking pretty small, but it was slightly bigger than where we started. And I think that was back in the time when no one knew what to do next. And so we had, in addition to Spark Notes, we had like 4 or 5 other things going. So we had a really bad version of like The Onion, which was, it was, you know, much worse than The Onion. And The Onion is another one of those sites which has been around for like an incredible amount of time, given, you know, what they do.
Was the point at this point in the trajectory just to have fun and build things, or were you actually looking to make money?
It was unclear. I think we did. I mean, we took some people's money to start this business, and it was costing us money to build it ourselves. I think.
Yeah.
I think we did know that we had to eventually show something for it. And back then, the business model was you come and read Spark Notes, and you see an ad or two, and then that's that's the way we made money. And I mean, back then even, it was very hard to make money on ads. I mean, it only got more or less harder over the years. But so yeah, so that was the idea. But it was this race for traffic, right? Everybody wanted more eyeballs and more interesting things to do on their site. And so it was just like a question of like putting enough experiments out there, and hopefully one of them would work. So one of the things we tried is that we had actually at that time the most popular purity test on the internet. Do you guys remember purity tests? It's a pretty good internet meme, I think, before internet memes really existed. And it would, like, you'd answer a series of 100 questions, and at the end it would tell you how pure you are on the scale of like 0 to 100. And this was like the thing people did back then, right? There was nothing else to do. And so, but yet again, another one of these products where you use it once and you're like, that was great. And but like,
were you talking purity of soul, or is this like chastity?
Yeah, it was like, have you ever had a cigarette? Have you ever drank? And it's just kind of go from there, right? And you have to like differentiate the people at the very top. So there are like some pretty, and it was meant to be like fun, It wasn't just a diagnostic test. So anyway, but certainly that hit a chord, struck a nerve with people, that it's fun to answer tests and find out, like the Cosmo, quiz, but just like the internet version. So so we started with the purity test, and then we kind of moved to different tests, and we actually had one test where this was a crazy thing. So somewhere in there we were bought by another company. So we started this company in May of 1999. We had sold it in February of 2000, so that was like less than a year.
Wow.
And the company we sold it to eventually went bankrupt within a year also. But as part of the sale, and we were like 21 at the time, so we were not very world-wise, I guess, and had a lot to learn. But anyway, part of the deal was that they would pay us like a given amount up front, and another part on the basis of how much money we earned. It's kind of an earn-out phase of an acquisition. And so one test we had was called, it was called the intelligence test, I think, and it would just ask you what seemed like a lot of questions, and the intelligence was that it never stopped asking you questions. So after we had established this reputation for like purity tests and things that worked, we basically gave people an unending page test of random questions with the sole purpose of trying to like drive up our ad impressions to like to sell more ads. And people got very upset with us for that. But that was like the kind of thing that was going on back then. So that was one of our tests. And then we're like, let's make something like a dating persona test where you would answer a bunch of questions that said like, what's your dating persona? Like, are you the boy next door? Are you the pool boy? Are you the 5-night stand? Like, these are some of the actual categories. And people really liked that. And after the test was over, we dumped you into an interface where you were able to kind of talk to other users and date. So that was like the real kind of progression. Like, it went from one thing to the next to like a dating test that actually allowed you to date. And that was maybe launched in the 2001 era, and there was all this corporate turmoil at the time, and we just never really went too far with it. Like, we knew enough that there was something there, that people wanted this product, and What we didn't know is, where it fit into the vision of the company that bought us from the company that bought us originally, and they just shut it down because they didn't know what to do with it. So in fact, so one company called iTurf bought us. Does anyone in this audience, has anyone heard of a company called iTurf? Yes. Okay. Two. We have two. Okay. So they were a really big internet company. They were had $1 billion valuation for a couple days, and and then they were not around for too long. But when they went bankrupt, they sold the ashes of this enterprise to Barnes and Noble, at least the SparkNotes side of the company, and Barnes and Noble got a really good deal because SparkNotes was a real product. I think it still is to this day, and people use it. And no one was really looking to buy internet companies back then. So that was so they wound up with it, but then they wound up with this dating business too, and they just said, no, we don't care about the dating business, so they threw it away. And eventually we all left, but we had this strong recollection that there was a desire for people to have a free and casual dating service. I think that's kind of the takeaway we had. And I say casual because there was eHarmony back then, and Match.com. They obviously were always around, but they made it seem a little bit more serious. This is a big undertaking, and no one wanted to fill out all the questions. And we get that complaint about OkCupid that it's a job for some people, whatever. But I think those other sites were even more this is super serious. You got to pay attention to this.
Yeah, it was a half-hour form for eHarmony, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
So one of the innovations was kind of make it more casual in our original pre-OkCupid product, and that's kind of where we got the idea for it.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty long-winded
answer. If we can take a tangent for a sec. By the way, if you have questions, tweet at #StartupGrindNYC, StartupGrindNYC. I'm going to start checking those in a second. But I want to kind of divert for a second and look at this kind of freemium idea and how that evolved, because you mentioned SparkNotes was free to use and partly driven by ad revenue, but partly I assume it was bought for the value of the actual product as well, right?
Yeah, there was always this threat, we're going to turn on subscriptions and we're going to start to get a lot of money, but that probably wouldn't have worked. But when we were having these negotiations with other companies, I was you don't know what this can do. This can be amazing. But yeah, I think it was very hard to get people to pay It was very hard to get a certain generation of people to pay for digital goods on the internet before I'd say 2009 or so. I think Candy Crush, these kind of iPhone apps have really changed people's philosophy or their personal decision as to whether or not I can buy a digital good that's not worth anything. But certainly it was a hard sell before 2006 or so, I think. Wait, was there more of a question?
Well, yeah. So the question is, OkCupid ended up coming in and really disrupting what had been a paid model.
Right.
But it seems like you had a much longer trajectory of offering things for free.
Yeah.
So was there much consideration of whether when you first built OkCupid it should be a paid thing or not?
It was always going to be totally free. We actually had a meeting. So I mentioned three of the founders, me and Sam and Chris, and there's one other guy, Christian, who was a co-founder of OkCupid too, and he came along. He was one of the writers at thespark.com who wrote a lot of those tests and who wrote the articles we published back then, and we really enjoyed working with him. So we thought, he'd be a great co-founder for OkCupid. So it was the four of us who started OkCupid in 2003. But when we did it, we kind of sat down and made a little cocktail napkin and said, we can make this much on ads per user, and it was for every 1,000 ads we show, we can make 10 cents. I think that was our initial estimate. Which wasn't actually too far off. That seems very low, I'm sure, to people in the ad business. But historically speaking, the ads are a tough sell. So we said that's fine because we could show this many pages, and our hosting would cost this much, and our rent would only cost $500 a month because we got the worst possible office in all of Manhattan. And so we made a little napkin, and we're this, we can do this. We could just put a little bit of our own money in and just get this thing to run indefinitely on ads. And so that was our original thought, and we really knew the ad market inside and out by the time we got done with OkCupid. And so, there was that original 10 cents per 1,000 number that I gave you. It got a lot better once this idea of retargeting showed up. And so retargeting is when you look at a car on Lexus.com, and then you go to New York Times and they're showing the picture of the Lexus car, right? So it's like the ads that follow you around the internet. And it turns out that's actually a really effective way to show ads. I mean, it used to be like totally random crap that you'd wind up seeing. And so this is like way more targeted and is a better deal for the publishers, because we were willing to basically give this thing away for free, but it turns out we can give it away for 50 cents for every 1,000 users if we use this new retargeting technology. So that actually really helped the business out a lot. But right before that, we had a near-death experience. So this is like in the 2008, 2009 period of OkCupid. So we were going with a certain ad rate in all of our economic assumptions, and then when the economic crisis really hit, I mean, the rates we saw were basically cut in a third, basically. So we're getting 33% of what we used to get within a couple of months.
This is 2007, 2008?
Yeah, no, more like 2009. Like the beginning of 2009 was like the very low point. And we thought we were going to have to turn the company off because nothing about our business had really changed. I mean, we were growing. We were more compelling to users than ever, but the amount of revenue we took in just fell off the cliff as a result of something totally outside of our control. So, I mean, it was pretty scary. It made us think that maybe there's something else we should try as opposed to ads. So I think that started like about a 2 or 3 year process in which we started giving some parts of the site away. We started charging for some parts of the site. And that actually has turned OkCupid, long after I've left the company now, it's turned OkCupid into a phenomenally good business. I think it used to be like a so-so business, and nowadays with the premium features, it actually makes a lot of money. And I'll give you, but we were like pretty careful to try to get the right social mechanics for the premium features. And I'll give an example of one that wasn't totally obvious, but turned out to be the right thing. So on OkCupid, you can browse anonymously or you can browse kind of openly. And what that means is if you browse openly, you get to see everyone who checks you out. So if I click on your profile on OkCupid, you say, "Oh, Max, you just checked me out," and it's a reciprocal relationship. So therefore, I get to see who checks me out. And it turns out if everybody browses this way, it makes the site a lot better. Because a lot of people get into conversations because they're like, "Oh, you checked me out, I checked you out. Let's chat a little bit, and we'll see where it goes from there." So when we introduced this new feature, it used to be everyone was anonymous. Then we said, "Guys, you're all going to be out in the open," and then messaging really took off as a result. So we said, "This makes the site healthier. This is a great product." Then the next phase of the kind of evolution was that, well, some people really don't like people knowing. Some people really don't like the fact that people get to see that they check them out. So you then can become an anonymous user. So you don't get to see who's looking at you, and the tit for that tat is that if you look at somebody, they don't get to know that you've checked them out. So that's like anonymous viewing, and that's open viewing. So those are the two different kind of OkCupid ways of profiles, the two different states an OkCupid profile could be in. So when it came to trying to monetize the site, we said, well, what if we kind of gave people the best of both worlds? So what that means is like I could check you out, and you wouldn't know, but I would know who is checking me out. So it doesn't really seem fair, right? It used to be tit for tat, but now I'm getting like the best of both worlds. And we said you can get that feature as long as you need to pay for it.
Okay.
And the dynamic there is that it makes the site worse off, and kind of everyone knows that if everyone on that site did this, it would be a much worse site. But it's like a scarce resource in that people felt okay paying for it because they realized they were subtracting from the health of the site. So it's like that kind of mechanic that we found that made premium features, or the features that eventually became the premium feature set, really compelling offerings, as opposed to those that made the site just harder for everyone to use. So if you look at Match.com, you can't message unless you pay, and that obviously makes the site a lot less healthy for the people who are just not paid users.
So at this point, this is 2009, 2010. Yeah. The company actually started in the early 2000s, so you had a good about a 6-year gap until you got to that point. I mean, obviously there were a lot of things that happened along the way,
right.
And we actually have our first question from Twitter from Social Monarch. Can you raise your hand for a second? Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So she asked specifically, what was the key to building your early user base? And I think this is a big question for a lot of people in the audience who are
Absolutely.
just starting a company.
So this was a real shock for us as to how hard it was. And it shouldn't be such a shock because there are many reasons not to use OkCupid. I mean, the most obvious one is you are not single. And the slightly less obvious one is that like, you're single but you don't want to use OkCupid. And like, I don't know, or how about you used to be single and then you found someone on OkCupid. So it is a very hard business to grow because there's this constant attrition of people who are dropping off, and the fact that you're just not appealing to a large majority of the population. So when we first launched in 2003, we had an initial spike. We managed to get all the old users from SparkMatch, which is the previous proto OkCupid, and they showed up at our door because we advertised on an old site saying, "Come join OkCupid." They said, "Great, sign me up." So we started with like 50,000 people just from that.
You were able to keep that user set?
Yeah, we had to like pay for ads, and like so, there was some way to reach them through Barnes and Noble's various websites, and so we paid for the ads. We brought them over, and then we had this huge influx of former SparkMatch daters who were super excited about it. And we said, great, next stop, like 1 billion users. And it turned out it was this horrendously slow growth at like 10 to 20% a year over 5 years. And it was a little bit demoralizing because, we thought we had a great product. We thought we had solved dating. And we just could not get the word out. Just no one seemed to care. And there are a bunch of different reasons why people didn't care, but for instance, we like hired a PR firm and said, "This is such a great dating website. You got to tell your readers. You got to tell like the readers of all these magazines that were so much better than Match.com." And they're just like, "All right, well, we'll try to get an article for you in this magazine right here that we have a press contact with." And if they did get it in there, it was like this little article no one read. And even if they did read it, it like didn't make a good case for why OkCupid was at all a good service. And so that clearly didn't work. I think the unfortunate answer is that we just tried a million different like trial and error, not at all dating related products to try to get people to show up for reason X and then switch to using OkCupid. So one of those was that we had this ability on OkCupid to make your own test. So if you wanted to write the test, like the definitive Harry Potter test, which someone did, you'd come to our site, you'd kind of fill out this long form, and then you'd now have a test that you could then send to all your friends, and they'd all take the Harry Potter test. So that was like an early thing that OkCupid did, which a lot of people knew us for that. But we'd get like 2 or 3% of them to convert to daters, and that was a lot of work for not too much payoff.
How did that fit within the brand of OkCupid?
It didn't. It was just like it's just like this is a bunch of crap that OkCupid has that we're like trying to get users to show up for. And the problem is like you take the Harry Potter test and you wouldn't even notice. It was like you wouldn't like see the URL bar. There was OkCupid, right? It'd just be like some random website. You'd basically forget about it, but maybe like 1 or 2% would show up and start using OkCupid. So like that was one thing we came up with. We just had like an incredible number of schemes that kind of worked and might not have been worth the effort that just slowly contributed to an early user base. But
did Harry Potter have a good conversion to dating? Were people interested in Harry Potter really excited about meeting?
No, I mean it was like that very low, like 2 or 3% conversion, but that was actually one of the most popular tests. That was probably taken like 5 million times or something.
Wow.
The Harry Potter test, yeah. I don't know.
Interesting. And so, were there any other examples of something that you really thought was going to take off? Something that you were sure this is going to bring in 1 million users a month, and then it just went nowhere?
Oh yeah, there were tons. Let me think of the other ones. I mean, yeah. Sorry. Oh, what worked? Oh.
Yeah. So no, we can definitely get there.
I want to try to think of some more of the failures, though. There were so many failures. I mean, internationalization was a tremendous failure. Holy cow! That took so much time. So we said we have a certain number of users in the United States who use OkCupid. Like people in France would love the service too, and so we took all this time to like translate the site into French, and we paid people to write the test. We wanted to make it like it sound like a cool French thing to do, and we got like 4 people signing up from France. So that was like a tremendous I can't believe we just spent 2 years doing this type of thing. Wow. But so as it turns out, dating is it's still a very local business. I think actually Tinder is pretty good at kind of global kind of of adoption because their profiles are so light. I mean, it's just all pictures for the most part, and so it's not like a very text-based experience. So Tinder translates pretty well, but nothing about OkCupid translated well to French. So that was an example of a huge failure. Well, what worked is like the combination of all these things. I mean, just these small additions we made over time just compounded each other. And I think as it turned out, like OkCupid did have a viral loop, we just didn't realize it. And the viral loop was like, you sign up for OkCupid, you maybe meet someone who's right for you, you start dating, you get engaged, you get married, and you say, we met on OkCupid at your wedding. And like, then all of a sudden people at your wedding are like, oh, OkCupid, I should check that out. So like, that was our viral growth loop. And I'm almost positive it exists. It just like, it took like 5 years, like for each for each one user to turn into like 10 more users, it took like that whole progression. And so I think that like in the end, like the effectiveness of the product is really what made it sell, but it just took a long time to see that actually happening. And so I mean, obviously, in the 2009 to 2010 era, like the OkCupid data trends blog was really an important driver of growth. I think that when we had like a big article that got a lot of press mentions throughout the internet, we certainly saw signups spike like for the couple weeks after that. So those were really instrumental, I think, in growing it. But we could not have made the blog until we were big enough. Like there was like a certain threshold that we had to get to before anyone would even care about what we had to say about dating. And we also needed enough data to be able to make the conclusions we made. And it also, each one of those blog posts took months of effort. It was just like, it was like trying to make more or less a new product every time we did it. And so we only were able to use that technique, which we kind of stumbled upon, but after we had a fair amount of momentum, to play on.
I mean, the OkCupid blog was and still is actually a really big example of content marketing, and maybe one of the first examples of startups using content marketing and using the data that they have to actually build content that drives customer acquisition. So you said each of these posts maybe took months. Obviously, there was still a payoff there. I mean, how many users would you get for an average blog post?
Oh, it's so hard to say, but certainly, like, I'm going to say if our average day we had 5,000 signups, on the day of a blog post, we'd see 50,000 or something.
Wow.
And so we'd see
10x.
Yeah, and it would trail off, of course. Like the first week or so, we'd see all the payoff. But yeah, that was the first. I mean, I think the real key to the blog for us is that, as I've said, like 60% of the population, 80% of the population just doesn't want to use OkCupid, but the blog was something that like everyone could talk about, and everyone would say like, I want to talk about dating and stuff like that. That's fun, even if I don't have to do it myself. And so I think that's why the blog was so successful for us, because it just a whole new set of people who wouldn't care about OkCupid otherwise like heard our name. And so I think that that was the key, I think.
Cool. So there are actually a number of really great questions on Twitter. Hashtag StartupGrindNYC. We're going to pull one from Dr. Kasim Nakvi. How's it going? So his question is, what are some of the user retention techniques? So once you got people signed up, how did you actually keep them engaged in your brand and in your product?
That is a great point. I think certainly the first thing about user retention that we took very seriously was understanding the different things we did to keep people coming back to the site. So the first thing we needed were good statistics, like, what was the effectiveness of certain emails that we sent? Would they get you to come back? Or, would messages get you to come back? Or like different matches, or the quality of matches. And so I think the first thing was to like understand exactly what the most effective things we could do for each user to get them excited, and then just provide more of it. So I think the best way to get a user to come back to OkCupid is if they get a message from another user. And so part of what the algorithm did at OkCupid after a while was not try to like match me up with like the absolute best person in the world for me, because probably that person has like everyone in the world would be the best match for them. And it would be a total waste of kind of messaging if I wrote to that person they had a totally full inbox, and they, why are they going to write me back if there are millions and millions of people who are writing to them? So I think one of the key insights we had for user retention is making sure that there was as much as possible an even distribution as to who was messaging whom on the site, and that way people would reply and try to push people in the direction of what we thought would be the best conversationalists for them. And I think that got people coming back more so than anything else. Once we had that, I think notifications such as like, oh, it's raining outside, like you should find someone to like hang out with tonight. Like, I mean, and we'd have to do that obviously if it was raining in your city. So like always kind of mixing up the messaging and always having like new things for people to see in their inbox, I think was pretty important too. But obviously, the biggest problem with OkCupid user retention is that people are always dropping off if they use the site successfully, and so we had it was extremely important for us to avoid like needless attrition. So obviously we spent a lot of time thinking about that. So good question.
So that's super interesting because a lot of those techniques are much more common now, and especially with the pervasiveness of smartphones, notifications are everywhere. But I mean, 5-6 years ago, it was not a commonly done thing.
Absolutely, and I remember I was probably writing the code for getting this to work, and my friend Chris, the co-founder Chris, was telling me what he wanted, when he wanted them to trigger, and he said, okay, well, only if this person hasn't been messaged for 2 days, and the last time they were messaged, they had more than a 30% response rate, and that the person who might potentially like be sending the message is like this much of a better match. And it was about like 10 different requirements in order to generate the message. And I remember thinking about like, this is going to take me months to implement. And he said, I don't care, you have to do it. And I think that's, a pretty good lesson, because any kind of correspondence you have with the user is so precious, because they can click unsubscribe, they can click this is spam, they can just like say, OkCupid emails me too much, forget about them. And so you have to be so careful to try to get exactly the right message and not kind of squander your chances to notify people. So oftentimes that turns out to be a big technical problem, but definitely one worth investing in, not just like, a throwaway to your least, to the worst engineer in the team. It's like almost the most important thing you could do to keep the site healthy.
So our next question may or may not be a good segue into what you're doing now. It's from Arndam Nag. Are you here? Hey. So his question is, what's the next big market? And I assume, what's the next big market for online dating? Because he suggests, is it a platform for senior citizens? Is it a platform for baby boomers? Or where? I mean, so you're really not involved in the day-to-day operations at all of OkCupid, right? But you must have some thoughts on how the markets have shifted.
Yeah, well, I think probably people are most interested in like the youngest possible, like the 18 to 21-year-olds are certainly like the most coveted group in any market, and definitely in dating. So I think that like the markets are, at least the public markets, are probably most excited about Tinder, I would say, because the thing about Tinder is it's like there's not much investment the user needs to make in order to get a dating experience out of it, and I think they're getting tremendous explosions in their user growth as a result. But at the same time, that's not a very defensible product, because something like OkCupid has these like really deep profiles that make it hard to transition to another site. And I think the easier it is to onboard people, like the harder it might be to prevent a competitor from taking them away. I mean, there's a little bit of that. But in terms of dating, it's weird. Like dating it's often been such like a totally uninteresting industry as far as like people who study internet businesses go. It's just when we were trying to raise money for OkCupid in 2006, like people said to us, like, you guys, like obviously, you've done things in the past, and so therefore I potentially want to invest in you guys, but you picked the worst possible business. I hate dating. Like, do anything but dating, and we'll maybe invest in you. And so there could be some truth to that, because dating is not a product that has relevance to so many people. It's just like, it's a pretty niche product. It's not like something like Facebook or like LinkedIn where like everyone really needs it, right? So I don't know if there's going to be a tremendous explosion of like a better version of Tinder. I think it just be a slightly different version after something is like the new greatest dating app. So I can't give you a good answer on that. I'm sorry.
sorry, I would be remiss if we didn't actually get to talk about what you are working on now, which is a company called Keybase, and I wonder if you could just briefly explain what it is.
Okay, so when I was like my academic background is I've spent a lot of time thinking about cryptography and security, and that's often been a very boring area to think about. I think for like any time but the last 2 or 3 years, it was just like no one really cared about security. It's just like what can happen. And I think recently people have changed their minds. I think there's a sense that maybe your data is a lot more important and you have more data, and you don't want other people to see that data. I think that's a pretty compelling motivation to care. And there's also like these crazy revelations about intelligence agencies or whatever. So given that's something like I had so much background in, I was interested to kind of do a project in that. And one of the key problems with security over the ages is that the user interfaces have been horrible. They've been like, no one can use this stuff. No one can figure out what it does or how to use it. And Chris and I wanted to work on another project together, and we decided this might be a good thing that the two of us can kind of bring two different perspectives on, because I was a little bit better versed in the like the mechanics of security, and he was pretty good at doing user interfaces and user experiences. And so we thought it would be a good thing for the two of us to try to see if we can make security products kind of more usable and get better adoption. So that's kind of where we started on Keybase. So we started doing this product called Keybase. It's a way, at least at first, for people to exchange public keys. And that sounds a little bit like of a nerdy detail. It just kind of is the opposite of everything I just said about it being more usable. But it's if ever you want to communicate securely with someone, you need to know kind of their digital identity before you do it. Because otherwise you could be communicating with someone pretending to be them. And so this is a problem that like any security product has, that like before you get started, you need to know who the other person is. And so Keybase is a way to figure that out programmatically. And it's still pretty early days for it. We haven't really figured out the right interface to expose to people, but we're getting, I think, a little bit closer. So
would it be fair to compare it to kind of like Twitter verification for the global internet? So
yeah, I think
kind
so.
of have this global like check wherever you are.
I think that's exactly right. I think Twitter has solved this problem for celebrities, and so the check mark means it's actually Michelle Obama and not like a fake account. So yeah, I mean, as much as we could do that for people who aren't famous, I think we're gonna try to do that. So it's a product that we don't even know what it is yet. So and we don't know if it's going to work, but we think there's a need for it.
But you do have an API that's available to some people right now, right?
Yeah,
so you have people actually starting to use it?
Yeah, and this is the other thing about security. To really convince people you're doing a good job, you have to be willing to basically open up almost all aspects of your operation. And so all of our code is open source, and all of our details of our databases are open to people. And so it's a hard business to try to figure out how to monetize, because I think typically, if you're giving everything away for free, what can you charge for? But I think the idea is we'll just see where this goes, and and openness of software and data is crucial, I think, to building up the trust to get people to believe that they're getting the right people. If it's just kind of hidden behind some interface or some website where you can't understand how it's working, then no one would believe us. So I think we have to establish credibility.
So we have a question from Josh Ness, who is standing in the back there. His question is, will we really, I mean, this gets to the essence of Keybase, really. Will we really be able to prevent the government from reading our emails? I mean, are we talking about peer-to-peer communication on that level?
So it's a great question. So email turns out to be a pretty hostile medium to bring security to, and so much is wrong with email. I mean, even if you use PGP email, which a lot of people don't, but even assuming you do, so much of your transcript is still unencrypted, like the subject and the sender and the receiver and stuff like that. So that's like the first problem with email, and the other problem is that like there's no notion of a session. So if you send me an email, I need to turn around and figure out what your public key is, basically, and start all over again. So email might not be the best thing to try to secure. It seems almost like a very tall order to get everyone on PGP. And even if we did, it's unclear if that would solve the problem. Can the government read everyone's email? I don't know. I don't like to talk about that stuff. But I mean, this most recent thing about how they found like malware in people's hard drives in Iran and stuff like that. I think that's pretty scary, because that means that it could be that everyone's machine in everyone's hands or desks is compromised, and if that's the case, nothing can be done. I mean, there's just like, if you don't have like the ability to trust software running on your own computer, it's impossible to get security. Now, I don't think that's actually happening. I don't think everyone's machines in the world are compromised, but that's a pretty scary future if that's what we're looking at. So I do kind of believe that the crypto is not breakable currently by the intelligence agencies. So like the actual mathematical foundations are still solid, but a lot of times there are just so many bugs in the way people implement the software that it doesn't really matter if the crypto is right. It's like so many other things to break into. So it's a pretty tough problem. I think also that people, everyone wants to talk about the NSA and different intelligence agencies, but I think security was an issue long before we had to worry about them. I think there are so many people who just like blackmail you or try to steal your identity, or just like these aren't agencies, these are like criminals, and so I think it makes sense to secure your data against them, right? I think that was always the idea in security. And moreover, there's this other problem too, where like a lot of websites just have bugs, and like, are you secure against bugs in Dropbox or like iCloud? And the answer is no, you're not, because like if any random engineer screws up there, like all the data can be exposed to everyone. Like it happened at Dropbox once. Like anyone on Dropbox could log in as anyone else's account for like a 4-hour window, a couple of years back. And so that's really scary, right? You don't want like your worst enemy to like read all your Dropbox files. So it's not just like the NSA we should be caring about. It's just like random stuff that's always been a problem. And like if we don't have to put the data in plain text on the server, then let's not. Let's try to encrypt as much as possible. And I think a lot of progress can be made in security to just think about that, not just trying to beat like the unbeatable enemy, which might not even be worth it. So
there are a lot of crazy examples. I mean, like Home Depot's credit card data was hacked.
Yeah.
Target was hacked. Obviously, the NSA stuff.
Right.
A few years ago, the tax agency in the UK like lost literally like CDs that had all of people's information on them,
right.
like a literal CD. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Unfortunately, we're getting close to running out of time. So Max, I have a few more questions for you. What we're going to do real quick first is something we try to do for every event, which is try to hear from a few folks in the audience. So if anybody in the audience has kind of 30 seconds and you want to stand up and talk about what you're working on and what the community can do for you, that's a big part of why we're here. Obviously we love hearing from Max, and OkCupid's an awesome story, but a big part of this event is really making sure that you, the audience, gets a chance to interact with each other too. So if anybody has a quick 30 seconds on who you are, what you're working on, and how we can help you or what you're looking for. Yes.
Hi. So, Natasha Green, we intervene. It's going to be a school-based online intervention referral system. And my question is, how do I let the school system realize that this is a service that's good for the counselors, it's about data, it's about allocating money accordingly?
I'm going to interrupt only because it's not actually a time to ask questions to Max. It's really a time to talk to the audience.
Okay, I'm looking for someone who knows about the ed tech system and how the DOE works to push a product that will help counselors and school social workers in their day-to-day.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
I'm also from the Startup Grind community, run the chapter in Pakistan. What I'm also looking for is, I have a digital media agency and I'm looking for digital media agencies here to partner up with.
All right, thanks, Fawad. And I want to point out real quick, Startup Grind has 167 chapters in different cities around the world right now. Fawad, for about 2 years, has been running a chapter in Pakistan, so we're really excited to have him in New York tonight. Likewise, I saw Jan started the chapter in Shenzhen, China, and he's here tonight. And we also have, what's that?
Can I ask for help as well?
Yeah, all right, please.
So guys, my name is Yan. I run a co-working space in Shenzhen, China, and I run the chapter of Startup Grind in Shenzhen. I actually need to find a nutritionist to talk to them because I'm consulting for a startup in China that's looking to bring the nutritionist market online.
All right, nutritionist. All right, thanks, Jan. Yes.
Hi, my name is Simone, and along with my co-founder, we recently launched a startup called Sydney.nyc, SYMBI, and we've been calling ourselves the OkCupid for roommate matching. So thank you for that, Max. It's really cool to hear that. So we are looking for awesome people spreading the word, if you know anybody looking for roommates, and also for help with our hacking growth ideas. So all the things you mentioned about trying a bunch of different ways to get users, we would love those ideas. So come talk to us afterwards.
And what's the project called?
Symbi.
SYMBI. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yes. Bill.
Hey guys, I'm Bill. I kind of have a sore throat, but I'm a full-stack web developer, and yeah, I'm like looking for work right now. It has to be in New York, it can be anywhere.
Hey Bill, let's go.
What's up?
Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so if you didn't catch that, full stack web developer looking for work. So don't all jump on him at once, but that is pretty awesome.
Also, if you are a registered nonprofit, then I'm willing to offer some of my time for free if you have a really interesting project to work on.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Bill. Yes.
Hey, I'm Emma. I'm with Vacay. I'm a co-founder. We're a collaborative group vacation rental platform. And so anyone that likes to travel, go on vacation with their friends or family, or as a full-stack web developer.
What's the project called? One more time.
Vacay.
Vacay. How do you?
Cheycay.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's do just a few more. Yep.
Just a quick thing. I'm actually building a financial literacy social media platform. I'm desperate for anyone who's interested in gamification. So anyone who knows anybody who's interested in gamification and knows a little bit about finance, please.
So gamifying financial literacy. Awesome. All right. Let's do like two more in the back. Yep.
Hi everyone, my name is Dries. I'm from France. So I'm basically building a marketplace connecting people passionate about arts with people who are curious about arts. So we've been running in Paris and now we're trying to expand it to the US. So anyone working in the art industry, I'd be happy to cover. Thanks.
Awesome. Let's do one more right here.
Hey, I'm Jake Krohn. I run Data4 Labs. We make big data analytics and visualization software. Sorry, also with sore throat. Targeted business users, anybody's interested in the space or is a JavaScript or CSS wizard. We'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. So, real quick, one more shout out to the volunteers that helped us put this event together. Quick shout out, Darren. Can you raise your hand for a second? So, Darren. Oh yeah, for the volunteers, absolutely. Darren, I know you didn't raise your hand, but Darren coordinates a lot of sponsorships for events, not only for Startup Grind, for a lot of other big conferences. So if anyone's interested in sponsoring conferences, Darren's the guy to talk to. We definitely want to thank Pivotal Labs one more time. Thank you so much for hosting us. Thank you all for coming. Please feel free to stick around. We'll have the space at least until 9 o'clock. So, Max, some rapid fire questions for you.
Let me turn it back on.
Yeah. So, super quick questions just to end out the night. Your Twitter handle is Max Taco. Yes. Why?
Because
hold it a little bit closer there.
We were trying to avoid spam filters in '99, and we had to make a random email address no one ever heard of. So Christian, who's one of the co-founders, said, "I'm going to be Christian_taco at yahoo.com," and that was the from address for an email we sent out to I think 1 million people back then. and I just stole the _taco. And by the way, if you try to sign up for a name on OkCupid that is already taken, like if you try like Bob or Sarah, it'll suggest Bob_taco or Sarah_taco. It's already taken. And so there are a lot of _tacos on OkCupid.
That's awesome. And real quick, what are you excited about in 2015?
2015. I am excited about no legislation that requires the weakening of cryptography. That's what I'm excited about. That's a little bit of a negative thing, but there's been some talk that like maybe people want to like weaken cryptography because of law enforcement or whatever. So I'm very excited for that not to happen.
All right. Thank you so much, Max. We really appreciate you coming out. All right. So again, feel free to stick around, grab another beer. If there's any food left, feel free to grab that as well. And we're going to be here for a while.